Welcome back, everyone, to our QuaranSTREAM Answers for COVID-19. As always, I am one of your members at large on the Fairfax County School Board. I'm Abrar Omeish.
And I'm Kimberly Boateng, the student rep to the school board.
Excellent. We always tune in 7 p.m. on Thursdays and Sundays. Today, we're going to have our special guest, our county chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Jeff McKay, who will tune in with us around 7:15. We're going to be providing some updates on Fairfax County Public Schools specifically in anticipation of that. Of course, you are welcome to text to the number 81010, the @ QUARANSTR, that's for QuaranSTREAM, to get text reminders for every session in advance of it. So like I said, every Thursday and Sunday at 7 p.m. Reminder, folks, if you are an eligible voter, June 23rd, there will be a Democratic and Republican primary for both Congress and Senate. So be sure to fill out your ballot. If you got it in the mail, make sure you mail it back. I received mine the other day and we'll be sending it back in the mail to make sure your voice is heard. So far in our county, we have 10,619 total cases of COVID, and that's just in our county. In the city of Fairfax and city of Falls Church alone. 1,286 of those are hospitalized individuals. 438 are cases that were new today. So we remain in a condition, of course, to be mindful of the situation with 385 total deceased. You may have heard that Fairfax County will be beginning its first phase into reopening businesses and houses of worship tomorrow. I personally will still be staying at home. I encourage the same. You may also be aware that they've announced they're going to be reopening athletic fields throughout the county and the school system to the public as a part of what's called Forward Virginia Phase 1. And the reopening is going to include more than 850 athletic fields, though we want to do this with caution. If you remember last session, if you're interested in looking at more detail about this, our specialist from the health department, Ms. Hemet, shared with us that there are a number of criteria we have to meet before we're able to fully open. Right now, Fairfax County has met a number of those, but we have not met all of them. We remain, kind of working on two. In particular, those being that we have a sufficient amount of PPE, personal protective equipment, to be able to open, as well as the need for contract tracers. So hiring the investigators who go and find the people who may be affiliated with any particular case to contain it as quickly as possible. So we still haven't met the threshold on those two. So again, be very mindful that we're not quite there to think that it's a free-for-all. And I want to acknowledge we've been receiving many emails to the school board about reopening schools and about doing in-person graduations. I want to just clarify two pieces of information. The first is we are constantly working with the health department in making any determination about opening schools. We are mindful that we want to open schools as well. It's a cost, no doubt, on the economy, but also on our families to have access and connection to essential services that otherwise are not available to them when schools are closed, or that are much more difficult to access virtually, of course. So it weighs on us, of course, to do that, but we want to make sure we do it at the right time. And the second piece with the graduations question, because I know some other counties and across the country may have been doing different things, I just want to let you guys know that we voted as a board not to rule out the possibility of in-person graduation. It's just a matter of how we plan that and when we'll be safe to do that. So I know I've been receiving some emails about folks who think that we're not doing it or we're not honoring our seniors. No doubt, we want to make sure we honor our seniors in the best way possible. We've put out a number of things, and we've discussed this in a senior stream that I encourage you to watch if that is of interest to you. But again, not ruled out that option. Outside of that, the Fairfax, our local government has something called the Coordinated Services Planning. If you or your family or your neighbors need anything to do with healthcare, food, any kind of service, financial support, housing, there is a line you can call that is 703-222-0880. So be sure, let your family, let your friends know, let your neighbors know, anyone who you think may need access to certain services. there are many resources, nonprofits, houses of worship, they're offering incredible supports. So I just want to make sure folks know about that and have access and have the opportunity to access them. Finally, our school board last week approved our budget. It's fiscal year 2021 budget. The budget, of course, was revised due to COVID, and we are very sad to have seen that we had to reduce the previously recommended transfer. The county originally was going to give us an $85.5 million addition, which we were excited to have, the long-awaited teacher raises, cost of living adjustments, and the step increase. I've been receiving some questions about this as well. So for our educators out there, our FCPS employees, unfortunately, I want you to know that that amount was cut to 7.3 million. And I'm sure the chairman can talk to us a little bit more about this when he does come on. But be mindful that that is the reason, and it's not off the table. Both the Board of Supervisors and the school board have voted to adjust their budget schedules. So we're going to be reviewing things every quarter to see what's possible based on the financial circumstances. So we really want to make this happen as long as we're able to secure it. But again, that budget has been approved for now. It does include a reduction of 4.8 million from the state as well. So on top of the county cut, along with other budget cuts, so the total amount that it was reduced by was 67 million. In any case, if you have more questions about the specifics, you're welcome to look at our last QuaranSTREAM with my colleague Elaine Tolan, where we discussed it in more detail. Finally, our superintendent had a town hall with the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I would highly encourage you to look at that on their Fairfax NAACP Facebook page if it's of interest to you. So with that, Kimberly will give us some updates on food and tech, followed by a little bit about academics and special ed.
Okay, so for food, total since March 14th, as of yesterday, there's been 1,119,956 meals distributed. I hope I didn't say that number wrong, but it's a big number. And for technology, as of the 25th, there's been 20,134 laptops distributed and 1,748. So internet is now available for FCPS families in need through Cox, Xfinity, and Verizon. So for academics, yesterday, there were 23,866 sessions with a total of 197,108 attendees. So just to push the gamut that a lot of people are attending, and we are able to have this like really fulfilling a session because of course I was in class. Actually this morning, I was in class this morning. So do you want me?
Is it smooth?
Yeah, it went smooth. It went fine. Lucky for me, I have two online, two classes for today, and then of course we have study period. So every single time it runs smoothly. So that's good for me at least. Did you want me to go over special education?
Yeah, go ahead and I'll cover seniors and English language learners.
Wonderful. So FCPS released a new special education update on May 26th and is available on the website. And it provides strategies for students with ADHD with strategies from Child Mind Institute, behavior intervention services, and tips for coping with stress. The superintendent has implemented a reopening of school task force to develop possible scenarios to address the needs of all FCPS students, including those with disabilities. So the group includes parents, teachers, administrator representatives, and how special education stakeholders will be included and have the opportunity to have input in the FCPS return to learn process. So the initial plan, it will be shared with the school board in June.
Thank you, Kimberly. And on top of that, next session, so like I said, we do these Thursdays and Sundays at 7. On Sunday, we will have a special ed stream specifically devoted to the topic. We're going to try to bring experts in the field, in addition to our assistant superintendent who covers special ed, which is under special services. So if you are affected, if that is something you'd like to seek resources about, be sure to come and ask your questions in real time. We'll be happy to facilitate that. For our seniors, so Fairfax County, of course, our school system, we've been providing a number of senior spotlights featuring interviews with some of the members of class of 2020 and focusing on their accomplishments. You may have also seen that your high school has an Instagram page specifically for your class. For the most part, I'm pretty sure all of our high schools are included. Feel free to let us know if they're not. To kind of highlight you guys, talk about what colleges you're going to, and give you a special shout out on social media. So be sure to check them out on Instagram and Twitter, where some of these shout outs are happening. Seniors also have included information about their future plans, their dreams for the future, that kind of thing. And we, of course, did our own senior shout out and stream 2 sessions ago. So be sure to check that out if you are of the class of 2020. Finally, there are some other public senior opportunities that are happening in celebration of everyone. Teen Vogue is hosting one in a few days, so on the 31st. And YouTube is also having a Dear Class of 2020 on June 12th at 3 p.m. It's going to be on YouTube, and we'll have a number of celebrities, including the Obamas and a number of other big figures. So both of those are opportunities to also further celebrate you guys for all of your wonderful accomplishments over the past 4 years. With English language learning support, I wanted to just announce to you guys that you may have heard this in our previous session with the budget. We, as a board, passed an amendment, which I was happy to sponsor, that will be supporting English language learning programs for the summer. This has not been done before, nor has it been budgeted for K through 8. So not only will high school students have access to resources, but we will have K through 8 accessing English language learning supports as well. So if you're an English language learner, maybe this is a little bit difficult to understand, but you can access summer school opportunities, and we'll be sure that your teachers let you know as well. Finally, Kimberly will go over some resources. I'll talk a little bit about mental health, and then we will go right into a conversation with our guest.
So the internet access for lower income families and FCPS. So if you go onto the main website and go onto the full menu, which is on the left side, you'll see that there is news, features, and events. And then there'll be, of course, the coronavirus updates. So you'll be able to look for daily updates, and then you'll be able to scroll to May 27th. So you'll be able to, so when you scroll, you'll be able to see the Cox, Xfinity, and Verizon resources that are being being given. And if this is applicable to you or somebody you know, you'll be able to access these resources and see what needs to be done for you to gain access to internet. And the SVS Behavior Intervention Services team will provide resources to help families support the growth of student executive functioning skills during this time of distance learning and beyond at a webinar on May 26th from 10 a.m. to noon. Is there any more? Yeah, so you can register for the supporting executive functions at home, a webinar for families on the FCPS website.
Thank you, Kimberly. And I see some questions coming in. Keep them coming, folks. I'm going to go over some mental health resources. I'll answer some of these questions, and we will have the chairman with us in a few minutes to go over what's happening on the county side. So for mental health, there are some new resources that have been put up in the parent resource section of our website. There's Building Resilience Through Compassion, tips to support healthy coping during this time as it's continuing to remain, prolonged. You can go through, again, under a resources tab, Student Safety and Wellness, and you will find a number of mental health and resiliency resources that have been updated. There's also some new information in that same section under Student Wellness that covers how to get through the loss of a friend or a loved one, how you as a parent may be able to help your child in addressing that, given that no doubt the cases are climbing. So we want to make sure everyone is supported and that parents are empowered to support their children. We also have a new post up there on 7 ideas for incorporating mindfulness into your routine while children are at home. I am sure for parents out there that you may benefit from some of these focus strategies, calming strategies. And I'll remind you that in our stream with the Department of Family Services previously, there were also a number of resources, including a hotline for successful strategies and support groups for parents who are trying to figure it all out during this time. Finally, for our employees, there are some resources on curbing teacher burnout during this pandemic. So just tips and strategies on more efficient ways of conducting a classroom, and different mental health supports. There are also some resources now out on digital citizenship. So I would highly encourage folks, families, there are tip sheets in multiple languages on how to make sure you stay safe during this time. And with that, I see our guest is hopping in here. So I'll give him a second here while I look at your questions. I see we have Jeff asked a question. Have there been any discussions about any differences in school openings between age levels? For example, elementary school students and high school students opening at different times in the fall because transmission prevention measures are different for more mature adults than they are for children. Social distancing is different for younger kids, of course, things of the nature. Before I answer that question, Jeff McKay, welcome. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm a survivor. I'm here. I'm doing well, one day at a time, but thanks for having me, and it's good to see you. It'd be better in person, but always good to see you, and certainly glad to be joining you.
Likewise, a pleasure. Long time no see, actually. We've both been kind of focused on what we've been doing and fielding all the emails and texts and trying to do what's right for our county. So
yep, absolutely.
Appreciate you making the time.
Sure.
I'll answer a quick question that came in about the FCPS piece, and then I'll transition right into our conversation.
Okay.
So yes, actually, Jeff, there has been discussion about possibilities of different openings and different rollouts or segmenting different, groups of students based on age. To your point, one of the presentations to the school board more recently in the past few weeks was actually showing some of the pictures of what that could potentially look like with, desks really, 6 feet apart and all of that. As of right now, doesn't seem to be clear plans as to how that will actually take place, but no decisions have been finalized. So yes, it's been thought of, and decisions on it are to come in the future when staff present a number of options to the school board. So we are continuing to have those conversations and considering the many ideas you guys are bringing forth as well. Great. So folks, feel free to continue sending in your questions. With that, Jeff, go ahead. What's going on in our county? Your emails are always very helpful. I've shared some of those resources. So thank you for those, but give us the rundown from your perspective.
Sure. Well, again, thanks for having me. And if folks have not signed up for my emails, please do. We try to get out as much information as we can to the public. Obviously, these are very trying times, and knowledge is power. So the more knowledge we can put in the hands of our community, the more they can do to protect themselves, protect their families, and help us get through what is one of the most trying times certainly any of us have ever lived through. And so let me start off by just being positive. I mean, we're blessed to live in a county like Fairfax. When I look at what's happening across the country, I'm very grateful that, we've been able to put resources into helping our most vulnerable, which I'll go over in a minute, but also really grateful for the members of our community, our faith community, our business community, our regular residents that are stepping up to help their neighbors and do the right thing. It's heartening. I'm also really proud of our frontline workers, our first responders, healthcare workers, that literally we have not stopped working in the county. I mean, we have not slowed down 1 minute, and the response and the way that these employees have stepped up for our community certainly makes me proud to live in Fairfax County. And I know that we're in a position to recover from this awful pandemic at a much quicker rate than most other parts of the country ever will, if they ever will. And part of that is because we've, put in place good infrastructure, good programs. We have good networks in the community, good nonprofits that are helping our most vulnerable, and that makes me really proud. So a few things we've done, big things. Let me touch on a couple big things. We did get CARES Act money from the federal government, and our board has been able to take that federal support and get it right out in our community. We dedicated $25 million to our community-based nonprofits so that they can provide food assistance, rental assistance, utility assistance to people in need. And we have a centralized coordinated services planning number, multilingual phone number that people can call in for any manner of help. And what we're able to do is link people up with nonprofits who can directly help them. And I want to be clear about this, that these nonprofits are able to help people regardless of immigration status, regardless of, what their circumstances are. They want to step up and help people. And our nonprofit community has much more flexibility to do that on the ground. And so the 25 million to them will go a long way in protecting folks. We know we've helped upwards of 800 households already with rent support. And those aren't households that are in county housing. Those are households dealing with private landlords or having trouble making their own mortgage payment. We know that our call volume has gone up, well over 100%, as one would expect, in the last couple weeks. And obviously, we're responding to those calls when they come in. We do have hotel rooms where we are self-isolating and quarantining people who can't do that at home, who test positive, including people in our homeless population, people who live in high-density housing and can't quarantine from their family and protect the rest of their family. We have upwards of 200 individuals being served by hotels across the county that we're being able to support with some of this CARES Act money. The other thing we've been able to do is we put $25 million into a small business grant program, which applications start on January 8th. And that's important because these are small businesses that have between 1 and 50 employees. And depending on how big they are is determines how much grant money they get from us. They don't have to repay it. It's meant to help them through the pandemic. And 1/3 of that is dedicated to minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses because they are disproportionately being affected in the business community. In the same way, some we know demographically are being disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And so we want to make sure we're helping people directly who need it the most. With our grant program, I would encourage people to go to our COVID-19 webpage. If you're interested in that, link into it and apply for it. Because again, it doesn't need to be repaid, and that's important. In terms of healthcare, where we are, we're entering phase 1 of reopening the economy tomorrow. For your viewers, they may know that many of us in the region reminded the governor that we were not meeting his own criteria 2 weeks ago. We would have put vulnerable people in a more vulnerable situation. And I think it would have been a mistake to enter into this 2 weeks ago. And the statistics don't lie. Where we are 2 weeks later, we're in a much better place because we use caution, because we relied on the science and the numbers and the data and the epidemiologists and the healthcare professionals and not politics to make that decision. We based it on real criteria. And as a result of that, we're able to reopen phase 1. And what I keep telling people about that's probably most important is we can't let our guard down. There's a mask requirement that the governor has put in place. People need to continue to practice social distancing. Frankly, our ability to get to the next phase of reopening is completely dependent upon our ability to adhere to the guidelines to protect ourselves, protect our families, and protect our communities. And as a reminder, folks who do the right thing are not just protecting themselves, but they're protecting vulnerable people in our population who are out there every day, driving buses, doing contact tracing, working in grocery stores, working in our nonprofits. We have to protect everyone who's making our economy continue to run right now. And a lot of times that means people, sadly, that already are vulnerable before the pandemic started. And so I think we all need to be cognizant of that. I would say with regard to the budget, and I know it's obviously a direct effect on schools, we were not able to increase the transfer by the 85 million that we had hoped to. Obviously, we couldn't raise the tax rate. It's a difficult year when people are losing their jobs and threats of losing their housing. So what we did was salvage as many county programs as we could, virtually all of them. We put additional money into the health department, which we vitally need right now, into our elections office, who are dealing with mail-in ballots and will be for the next year. And we did put $7.31 million more dollars into the school operating fund. It's a far cry from 85 million, but it's 7 million more than we were able to contribute to schools last year. We know that you and your partners in the school board are going through really, really tough times, and we want to continue to be a partner with you. We strongly advocated for the $21 million in CARES Act money that schools got, desperately needed. And we're looking forward to working with the school board throughout the summer to address what happens in the fall. This is one of these moments as a parent with 2 FCPS students at home. I have so much more appreciation for what our teachers are doing in our school every day. And I think, the idea that we're not able to get back to school this fall is something that, many of us pray never happens, and that we can get kids back in the classroom in some shape or form. We know that we're in a marathon here and not a sprint. And we want to make sure we have the revenue necessary to help schools deal with the new reality that they might face in the fall. And so the conservative approach we're taking to this budget is to make sure that we don't run out of money to help our most vulnerable this year. Unlike the federal government, as you know, Abrar, maybe not everyone knows, but we can't run a deficit. We have to balance our budget every year. And the idea that we don't have the support and resources to reopen school is not something I ever want to fathom. And so we want to be there to work with you to do whatever it takes to make that happen. I'm glad the chairman of the school board, Karen Corbett Sanders, is on the statewide committee looking at reopening, because I do think the state needs to step up here, set out criteria that are fair, that can be used everywhere in the Commonwealth, give us the guidance that's necessary to reopen schools based on safety, based on protecting our teachers and our workforce in the schools, our bus drivers and our kids, and do it in a safe way. And we will continue to partner with you to make that happen. And so a lot of things happening in the county day to day. Please check our newsletter. The one thing I want people to make sure they understand is that we will continue to fight for full transparency and health data. I pushed hard to get the dashboard put up that shows some of the demographic fault lines of testing and positive test cases. I've been fighting, and now we have up online a Health and Human Services dashboard, which people can look at, and it shows where need is in the county. Where are we getting calls for assistance, so that businesses and nonprofits that want to do more and help, they can look at this dashboard and see areas of the county where we're getting the most requests for assistance. People can also see real time the money that we're putting into rent assistance and other programs in the county. But we're here to help our community through this in the best way we can. And I am optimistic that we're doing so much better than the rest of the country, but we still have a ways to go here. And we still are going to have to be diligent and safe if we're going to get through this together. And look forward to answering any questions that folks have. And good to see you. And thanks again for having me, Abrar.
Of course, always good to see you, Jeff. And thank you for that overview. I will say I would encourage people as well to sign up for your newsletters. They always have very detailed information, resources that are out there for you and your neighbors, to access. So thank you for your diligence on that.
Sure.
For the sake of our audience too, it is a variety of folks. So just wanted to make sure I outlined, we have our federal government. It's pretty straightforward who those people are. We have our state government, right? That's our governor and everyone else. But locally in Fairfax County, this is our local government. And we generate our own revenue through taxing and our local monies to be able to have a budget in the first place. And so then you have, Jeff McKay, who's the chairman of what's called the Board of Supervisors, in addition to members from each district who make decisions for our county specifically. Our school board kind of serves alongside them, but we receive our money from them in addition to small amounts from federal and state money to make decisions for the school system. But that is a service that is provided through our county government ultimately. So just want to make sure I put that out there as people ask their questions. Tell us, Jeff, a little bit more about the communication or maybe even the limits that have existed with federal, state, and local. So you guys have to constantly be in conversation with all layers that influence this, right? It's not even a decision that could be made locally. There's so much you're relying on from all other parties. So maybe help us better understand why some of our decisions are constrained by that or informed by that.
Yeah, happy to. Great question. So every week I'm on calls with our congressional delegation, with the governor and his administration. The General Assembly, of course, is part-time and not meeting. So we spent a lot of time with the governor working out things like shortage of tests. That's been a chronic concern of ours. Shortage of PPE has been something we've been trying to get state support for. With our federal delegation, most of our talks have been about improving the CARES Act language before it was adopted, making sure Fairfax County got its share of that money, which we actually did and did well on. I've been spending a lot of time talking to our congressmen and our senators about the next tranche of federal assistance. There's a HEROES Act bill that's pending on Capitol Hill that would provide significant additional resources to local government, including 5 times the amount of money that was in the CARES Act for education. And so that's something that, we're pushing hard with our federal delegation. And, frankly, they understand, and I don't think most people realize this, but the largest employer in the United States of America is state and local government. And we are where people go first for assistance. I mean, we are the front line helping our community. And so most of our time with the federal government is fighting to get revenue that our taxpayers have paid coming back into Fairfax County to support us in a great time of need. At the state level, we're spending a lot of time, as I mentioned before, about supplies. But the other thing we spend a lot of time on at the state level is so many rules and laws are written by the state, and the county's role is to just implement them. So just as an example, we talked a lot with the administration about face masks on some of our Virginia Association of Counties calls. And we talked to the governor about the real world that we deal in and how enforcement of that is not something that law enforcement should be doing. I mean, we're on the front lines. We don't need to criminalize people right now. We need to help educate them, help them understand why wearing a face mask is important. And so we played a role in working with the governor and making sure that when that requirement came out, there was sensitivity to the fact that there are parts of the state that don't want to police that. There are parts of the state that want to educate people, and we believe most people will comply with it. So we spent a lot of time talking to them about that. And then, of course, the governor sets all the reopening restrictions and puts them in place. And so, we've talked to him about things like why Tyson's Corner Center is very different than any other retail center anywhere in Virginia. And so when you put together rules about how you reopen retail, have you thought about how that affects places like Tyson's Corner, like our houses of worship? We have some that can fit thousands of people in them. They're not small country churches like you find in a lot of other parts of the state. So just bringing awareness to the governor about the diversity of Northern Virginia compared to the rest of the state. We spend a lot of time on that and trying to play a role in whatever rules come out at the state level. And so every week we spend a lot of time with these folks, and your point is so well taken. I mean, we need federal support, revenue, to help us in local government. We need state rules and regulations that work for our population and our density in Fairfax County. And then at the county level, we need to constantly manage to make sure that we're delivering goods and services to the people in our community who need them most. And so it really is an all-in team effort, and all levels of that government have to work together well.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. And no doubt, you touched on the fact that the funding is so tied to this too. For the sake of our public, I know some of our teachers, we have heard from you, and I know I contacted you about this, Jeff, too. But the step increases and the cost of living adjustments, all things considered in our county, we are lucky in many ways, as Chairman pointed out, to not have an even bigger hit on what's happening. So we promise we are continuing to think about this. And I know for the Board of Supervisors and the school board, we voted to have quarterly reviews on our budget so that we can constantly reassess what's possible as we move forward. Did you want to say anything about that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, we've always done quarterly reviews. I think the real difference is that in these typically a quarterly review is an update on, whether our revenue projections are matching what's actually happening. I'm hopeful that our quarterly reviews say that the economy is not being hurt as bad as we thought. And so it frees up opportunities to do a lot of the things, some of the things you just mentioned, like pay increases and things. I think it's too early to tell. I will say that our board's philosophy right now is to do our economy no further harm. And what I mean by that is we don't want to be a local government like so many local governments across the country that will be laying off workers, reducing their force, forcing good talent out. We had a pact with our employee groups, and we did this during the Great Recession. I was on the board during that time too, earlier in the 2000s. And we made the same commitment, which is our number one commitment is to keep our employees working, keep their jobs secure, not have to lose positions, because if you start having to lose positions, you lose talent that takes you many, many, many years to recoup when you can recover. And so our first thing is keep people in their jobs. We did on the county side, and I know schools did some of this. We did some increased administrative leave. We've worked with individual employees with medical leave. We've expanded teleworking. We've tried to be a model employer for our own employees, especially at a time when we couldn't increase pay. We're looking at expanding medical leave, doing things for our employees to show them how much we value them. But the best way to do that is make sure we're not having to cut positions. And that's not a position I want to be in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for putting that out there, Jeff. And no doubt it's been tough decisions all around figuring out how to prioritize the amounts that we do have. I want to turn it to Kimberly. We are getting a number of audience questions. So Kimberly will go ahead and read some of those out for us to answer. So Jeff, Kimberly is our student rep on the school board.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Hey, Kimberly.
So I believe you, Abrar, just to confirm, you already read Jeffrey's
Jeff's question.
And have you gotten to Robert's question?
Go ahead. We can start with Robert.
Okay. So Robert Rigby said, I'm concerned about a statement last week from the U.S. Education Department encouraging Connecticut to limit opportunities for transgender girls. Will FCPS stand by its transgender athletes by maintaining the policies that we and the Virginia High School League currently have?
So that is a school-specific question. Happy to address that real quick. I want to make sure we give the chairman the opportunity, and I will be here as well to answer it further, like every episode. But yes, of course, we're committed to making sure that each student is respected regardless of their identity. And this is certainly inclusive of that. With sports in particular, I'm thinking about your question here. I absolutely would want to make sure that we are maintaining that. And my understanding is in FCPS, we are. If there are any issues with implementation, right, in a system with 190,000 students, thousands of employees, to Jeff's point, that one of the largest employers in the state that people don't realize always is the case, there will always be implementation gaps. So those are where, we can come in to bring them to our attention. The first contact, as we always talk about, the chain of command, right? So your teacher, if your teacher doesn't help you, the principal. If your principal doesn't help you, then you can contact your school board member, and we can try to address where those gaps are. So no doubt, Robert, feel free to be in touch, and always happy to help, facilitate whatever needs are there. So thanks for the question.
So I believe Amy Hollander, and she asked if we still want to help or to give or help. Do you have suggestions on where or who needs donations or services the most?
Yeah, so I'm happy to start with that. As I mentioned earlier, we have a network of nonprofits that are providing direct assistance to so many in our community. There are a lot of places that take donations. On our webpage, if you're on our COVID-19 webpage, you can find a list of nonprofits that are participating with the county. All of them always welcome contributions. I know in talking to a lot of them, money is the most important thing because they can stretch dollars into buying food and other things far further than we can just walking into a grocery store. And then they have some chain of command things where, it gets difficult to get that into the hands of the right person unless it's organized by the nonprofit. So cash, some material goods are always welcome. But if you're interested in helping, the best thing to do is help one of those county recognized community-based nonprofits, even right in your own community. We have a Health and Human Services dashboard I mentioned earlier on the COVID-19 page that shows you where the greatest calls for assistance are coming from in the county. And you can look at that area and you can see the nonprofits that are serving that area. For example, if you were hypothetically to live on Route 1, you would know that United Community is providing tremendous resources, Good Shepherd Housing, some of the groups that do work on the Route 1 corridor, and they always welcome contributions. And I think it's a really important question because we forget that a lot of these nonprofits do a lot of fundraising throughout the year to provide supports for their community. And right now, galas aren't happening, fundraising dinners aren't happening, and their staffs are so busy providing direct support to residents that their fundraising has really suffered a lot. And so anything the community can do to help them is most welcome, and know that your resources are going right back into our neighbors in Fairfax County.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff, for mentioning that. The coordinated services has been such an incredible reference to give people. I'll add, on June 7th, so not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, we're actually going to have a stream with a number of the representatives that Jeff mentioned, some of the folks who are offering these supports and all that. So if you want more detailed info, feel free to tune in. The second thing I'll say is, I know Volunteer Fairfax is doing a lot of the coordination for the county to connect people with some of these groups. So I would recommend, making sure to check out their website, and there's a whole list of contact info of these various organizations to see who you can, where you can help. So thank you for the question. And I'll say this too, that's part of what's been beautiful about this is you have, in the face of the difficulty, people who are thinking beyond themselves and wanting to extend a hand and help. And that's what makes our county so great and what makes me proud to serve. And I'm sure, Jeff as well, who's expressed the sentiment in the beginning.
Absolutely.
Kimberly, go ahead. What's our next question?
We have actually 2 more questions from Amy as of right now. Where'd it go? I had it just now. Here we go. So she said, I read in the news that a DeVoe is pushing for states to ensure public schools send CARES Act funds to private schools. Is FCPS feeling that pressure?
Not to my understanding. We received about $22 million in CARES money, and we're currently planning on how to spend that in FCPS. So my understanding of myself and my colleagues, we're focusing on our public schools because that's the money that's being given to us to support that. So.
And her second question, the other night in Dr. Brabrand's town hall meeting hosted by the NAACP, FCPS came under fire for lacking diversity in its staff. I know it requires folks to apply, so I was happy to hear that FCPS has measures to work with HBCs, which is historically Black colleges, for those who don't know, to increase the candidate pool. Likewise, do you know anything that SPS is doing to encourage diversity within the Board of Supervisors? Keep in mind, I understand that it takes folks to run to be elected.
I'm happy to comment on the school system. You started with that. I will say our commitment as a board to equity is unquestionable. I mean, we certainly, want to hear from the community and make it better. But I will tell you that we are all very strongly committed to this. I'm personally committed to this from my own upbringing, from what I saw in our schools. And it's more so about getting our system to be there. And everyone's intentions are in the right place with that. So how do we train our staff to make sure everyone's on the same page? And with the chief equity officer position that I think was particularly addressed in the NAACP town hall, we are looking to expand that position. We're certainly in conversation with our superintendent about what we want to see with that. But no doubt are supportive of the oversight that role has on a number of key divisions to ensure equity of implementation down the line. So it's something that I promise you is on our minds, is something we want to push forward. And we have our Minority Student Achievement Oversight Committee that I'm happy to be the liaison for, that consistently brings things to our attention as well. So always happy to, sorry about that. Was trying to remove someone from our Zoom here, but always happy to, of course, further clarify that and be accountable on that and push forth what you think is beneficial. And I'd love to hear, of course, from Jeff about the Board of Supervisors side of things.
Yeah, so first, let me speak from the board standpoint. Obviously, the voters choose their elected officials, and this year we elected to my old seat, the first African-American male to the Board of Supervisors. We also elected the first Latino in Dahlia Palchek in the Providence District. So from the Board of Supervisors standpoint, just this last election, we made history in 2 areas that, we hadn't had that diversity before. Myself, I grew up in the Route 1 corridor, so I've always lived in a diverse community that I'm proud of. I know the reputation in some parts of the county that the highway has, and frankly, that inspired me to run for office in the first place. I was one of the original co-authors of the One Fairfax resolution because I grew up in a community where I could see with my own two eyes disproportionality that existed in our community, opportunities that didn't make it to parts of the county that we existed in other parts of the county. And that was largely the platform I ran for chairman on. And I think is why I was successful in the election. And so that philosophy at the county level has to percolate through all of our county agencies. We have a chief equity officer. She has a team of people she works with. She's heavily involved in the COVID-19 pandemic response, because if anything, what this pandemic has done is shine a bright light on disproportionality in this country and even right here in Fairfax County. And so while we have a lot of work to do here, we have to correct systemic long-term injustices with the policy decisions that we make. And if anything, what this pandemic has done is proven the utility of looking at all decisions we make through a racial and social equity lens. And our school board and board have adopted a joint resolution to do that. And for anyone who in our community was doubting the utility of that or thought it was just words on a sheet of paper, this pandemic has proven why this has been a passion of mine for a long time and why we need to deliver for the most vulnerable in our population. And that is something that this board is committed to more so than any board I've ever seen before. And I've served on this board for 12 years. I served on the staff of the board for 12 years. I've seen a lot of boards come and go. I have never seen one with the passion that this board has for helping out the least among us who for far too long have been passed up.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, Jeff. And, you know, I would just say that it's also shown us how, in reality, something that maybe people don't realize, there is a financial cost to not valuing these things, you know, in advance, to not being proactive about our equity challenges. No doubt there are issues that we should be worried about in general and should be values-based propositions, no questions, right? But for some of us, we need to be a little more convinced. Truly, I mean, when we think in the short term and just tend to what's in front of us rather than think in the long term for everyone in our community, we end up incurring costs that are essentially everyone's taxpayer dollars. So I just wanted to make sure I put that out there. So I see a question here from Billy addressing long term. So we're going to potentially open tomorrow, kind of a scary proposition. And then there's talk of a second wave, right? So what's some of the planning that's you know, happening there? I can tell you guys from the school system, we're certainly keeping that in mind as we look at proposals for whether we want to open or not. We're choosing a more conservative approach. Jeff, you know, what's your perspective from the county?
Yeah, so great question. And you know, if all of us had a crystal ball, we'd be able to answer it with more clarity than you're probably going to get. What I will say is we are planning for this to be with us for the long term. I think the science supports that. We are just started today, the county hiring 400 contact tracers to add to our existing number of contact tracers to try to be proactively tracking down people that might have had exposures to reduce the spread. We know that we have to do more testing. We have more testing even scheduled this weekend. As quick as we can get tests, we're putting them out there in the community. Our health department has providers all over the county doing testing. I mentioned earlier the transparency of our data. This is really important. The public needs to know what's going on, and we need to be addressing it as we move forward in a very aggressive way. And so what you see with phase one reopening is proof that a lot of our efforts are helping. And I want to make sure people understand a couple things. One, you're going to see the number of positive tests go up. And that is because we are testing a lot more people. And so it's the percentage of those that we test that are positive that is going down. So that is helpful. That says we're going in the right direction. We have hospital capacity. We check that daily to make sure that we're tracking okay on that. I mentioned the contact tracing. I mentioned the increase in testing. Look, we're not, because we're entering phase one, backing down at all. We're actually ramping up every day all of these efforts. We're not retreating on any of them. We will follow the data. The thing I told the governor and why Northern Virginia opened 2 weeks later, we want to follow the data. If the data does not support us moving into phase two, then we should not be moving into phase two or phase three or any other reopening. And so we will continue to follow the data, continue to make protecting people's lives our number one proposition. We want to give businesses an opportunity to reboot. We want to give people an opportunity to start doing the things they love doing, but we have got to do it safely and we have got to do it diligently. And I feel like the delay and the fact that we've ramped a lot of these things up and a lot of our numbers are going in the right direction gives me hope. Now, if we do have a second wave, we will have all of these assets in better place to be able to respond to it. Let's hope that doesn't happen, but I'm not naive enough to think that there's not a high probability of that, which is why we're investing in all this infrastructure now, and we will leave it in place because we think, again, to repeat myself, we're in a marathon here, not a sprint.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And I think it's important. I see some questions as well about particularly vulnerable people. It's important to clarify that the phasing, right, keeps that in mind. So the first phase does not include them. If I'm at a correct understanding, would love your clarification.
Well, what it is, phase one really only allows restaurants to increase some of their capacity. It allows private gyms to do some outdoor recreation. It allows some non-essential retail to open at 50% building capacity with social distancing standards put in place. This is by no way a reopening in any real way of the economy. This is some increased flexibility for some businesses to begin to do things. For example, hair salons, can open by appointment only. But I want to caution, every single thing in phase one still must adhere to all of the executive orders of the governor, all the CDC recommendations about social distancing. And as you might expect, the county is going to have to put a lot of resources into enforcing those rules and educating people on them. And so one of the benefits of the phases is to test out small expansion here. What is that doing in terms of our numbers? Before you go broaden that to increase capacity at some of these businesses, you want to make sure that your data supports it. And the point of the phasing is to test things along the way. And the governor has said, we have told the governor, as a Northern Virginia United Region, this is Fairfax, Prince William, Loudoun, Alexandria, and Arlington, all of us in a unified way have told the governor, we want Northern Virginia's phasing to be judged on data, not on anything else. So we're willing to take a longer time, if necessary, to make sure that we're protecting human life here.
Absolutely. And I can attest to the fact that there's a lot of pressure politically to open. Folks are constantly flooding us with the information. And of course, even self-imposed pressure, knowing the costs on people personally and their jobs and on the economy broadly. So there's tension. There's pressure pulling us in both directions. We want to make sure we rely on the facts ultimately to make good judgments. So for our viewers, ask your last minute questions now because we're about to wrap up. But maybe as we close out here, Jeff, let's give a final message of hope to our audience.
Yeah, so I'm happy to do that. And we kind of touched on this earlier. As someone who has lived in the county my whole life, I don't think I've ever been prouder of the way our county has come together during a really difficult time. This is new ground we're treading on, and the way we've helped our neighbors, the way we've tried to remain optimistic, the way we have stressed in schools with all the difficulty of internet and technology. Let's love our teachers and be kind to them. Let's be good to our kids. Let's preserve our mental health. And by and large, everywhere I go in the county, I hear gratefulness for the responsiveness of the county, for how lucky we are to live in a place that, is methodical and has resources to help our community. And, watching our faith community and business community in particular make food donations, show up at hospitals and police stations to just feed our hardworking frontline workers. our county employees who come to work every day, whether it's, picking up trash or taking a stressed out call for someone who needs mental health support. These folks are killing it every day, helping our community. And it makes me really, really proud. And I think the takeaway is, as I said earlier, there is no place in this world I would rather be living in through difficult times. And certainly this is a difficult time than Fairfax County because of the passion, compassion of our people, dedication of our public workforce, and concern of our citizens, people who call in and ask these questions. We've had good ideas come from these questions. We are a county government that values public input, and we feel like our product is better as a result of it. And so remain optimistic, working together. We will get through this. We've been through tough times before. We will get through this, and we will respond economically faster than probably anywhere else in the country because we put in place the assets to be able to do it. And so keep heads high, keep positive, and keep looking out for your neighbors. If anything, this has helped us understand the importance of community in a way that might have been lost until something like this comes along to get us to focus on that. Community matters, diversity matters, compassion matters, love for neighbor matters. And I have seen that in every corner of this county. It gives me a lot of hope.
You're muted.
Always has to happen. But no, thank you so much, Jeff. Certainly uplifting. And to his point, that we are better in our own decision making when we hear from you all. And it's all about being a responsive local government, responsive public officials who can make good decisions because you guys are a part of it. We are a community making these decisions together. So thank you so much. Kimberly, I don't know if you wanted to add anything or mention anything.
Yes. So we have, I think, one last question that came in from Amy. And she was wondering she's like, so schools may not open during phase 2. I can't tell from the wording, but are we allowed even to open in phase 3?
So that is, Jeff, if you know the direct answer to that.
School opening and closing is really exempted from the phasing, other than like daycare centers and things like that the state is looking at. Schools are only going to reopen when the governor signals that schools are okay to reopen. And that's one of the reasons for this statewide task force, is trying to work out all the issues to get schools to reopen. Clearly, they're far more complicated than when you open a hair salon or a nail salon. And so those things are going to gradually reopen. But when it comes time to reopen school, that's really going to be a statewide decision in my mind, with guidance coming from the state. And we'll be working closely with the school board on what that actually looks like, in terms of our facilities. But that's not a decision that is tied to the phases right now of reopening the economy.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. My understanding is, it's been separate. We're constantly in conversation with the Secretary of Education and his team, in addition to health experts from Fairfax County who help inform our plans moving forward. We have not made a decision yet as a school board. We have reviewed some of the proposals as to what we anticipate based on what the governor may decide. But like I said, no votes are even scheduled on that just yet because we're not sure what their timeline is going to be. But with that, thank you all for tuning in. Jeff, it was really good to see you actually after all this, craziness. Appreciate everything you're doing. Hopefully we'll see you in better times in person.
Thank you.
And, tune in every Thursday and Sunday, 7 p.m. We're going to have special ed next session. Look forward to having you. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.